Hi, it's Ray from Pro Shaper Workshop, and we're back on this 150 door. This is a perfect example of the restoration problems everybody faces. It seems like talking about restoration and showing some restoration stuff has really gone down a good road. A lot of people are into that versus coach building, but I want to probably do 50-50, a little bit of restoration, a little bit of coach building. So a lot of the skills overlap, but there's a lot of unique skill sets in doing restorations. And there's a lot of evaluations you have to make too. And as I spoke on the first part of this, there's so much damage on this. Even though it's really minor, it all adds up. Is it worth it just to make a whole new door skin, or is it worth it to try to take out all those dents and having to remove all the paint and all that stuff and the rust? So let's opt for repairing everything. We're going to do this door all up nice. And the first step is getting this paint off. And I went to Home Depot, and these are the two, well, I think they had one other stripper, but it wasn't as good, I don't think. What you always want is what's called the heavy body paint remover. This one claims to take off let's see, was this the one? Yeah, epoxy. It says it takes epoxy paint off. I haven't found a paint remover that really works really good on epoxy paint yet. There's probably one out there. My one that I used to use all the time was Zip Strip. I don't know if that's still available or not. I'd have to search it online to see if it's still around. And these were like $43 or $42 a piece or so. I started taking paint off at my grandfather's restoration shop when I was 12 years old back in 1963. I've stripped with chemical strippers a lot of cars. I've sandblasted too. I know the difference between sandblasting and paint removing. Paint removing is a lot better. So let's try a little bit of each one of these on one side and the other, and I'll show you the procedure I learned when I was a kid. This stuff will bite you really bad in the eyes and stuff, in the hands. You should be wearing rubber gloves. Even dumping this in there like this, it'll splash up on your eyes, so it's pretty nasty stuff. You got to be very careful. I don't always follow my rules that I hope everybody does. But okay, so this was the Clean Strip brand. We're going to put that over here, and just like the navel jelly rust remover, you don't want to do this. You don't want to brush it on. That makes it too thin. You want to daub it like this. Nice big daubs. And usually I do like 1 square foot at a time. Otherwise you get way ahead of yourself. Now, a lot of the cars we were doing back at my grandfather's shop were 30s classics, heavy classics. There'd have been Bentleys and Rolls Royces and J. Duesenbergs and Auburns and Packards, Stutzes, and all of that was painted with nitrocellulose lacquer, which came off really nice. This is probably, it could be an enamel or it could be acrylic lacquer. I don't think it's an epoxy. And usually with the lacquers, they'll start to totally start to peel real fast. This one isn't doing that. We'll see what kind of results we get here. We got the safety closure on here. So this one actually looks a little thicker. I'm going to get a separate brush for that so I don't mix them up. Yeah, now this stuff gives off some horrible fumes too, but I've got a really big shop, so there's a lot of air in the shop here. I really can't even smell it right now, but usually I can smell it. But it's best to do it outside or with a garage door open. So the cautions are best to do it with a garage door open or outside, but you don't want to do this in the sun either. This stuff will harden up and dry up real fast. So the wetter it is, the more active it is. So far it looks like between these two brands, the Jasco and the Clean Strip, this looks like it's doing a little more action than that one there. So it usually takes about 5 minutes or so for this to really do its job. This has been on for a couple minutes or so. And this has only been on a minute. All right, we'll let that sit for a little bit and see if it does what it's supposed to. If you're doing a real nice, valuable aluminum bodied car, you don't want to use a scraper like this, a putty knife, because it'll gouge into the aluminum. What I used to do down my grandfather's, we'd take a piece of hardwood and put a nice chisel end on it, get it really sharp, and that wouldn't allow you to dig into the aluminum. So that was a good little trick I learned down there. Now, this is slow and tedious work compared to sandblasting, but all the restoration of cars, if it's a valuable car, you want to take it nice and slow. You don't want to speed things up. I mean, I've seen people take a 36 grinder and grind all this paint off, and what we're trying to do here is forensics here. We're taking the paint off and we're going to reveal the skin, and we're going to find out what happened to this door in its life. We're going to find out a lot of information about this dented area over here that has some filler in it. And if you sandblast it, you wipe that all out. You don't get to see what exactly happened to this body of this car through its lifetime. And that's really important, diagnosing what happened to it and how to fix it. So we're not going to get this all stripped today. We'll maybe get those little sections. I'll show you the total procedure of how to take that off. So this is starting to do its job pretty good now here. You can see, see, this is the nice forensics here. That red stuff right there is called nitrostan. That was a putty that was used as a finishing glaze putty that was used in the 50s and the 60s. So this has got a lot of damage on it, and all of this stuff would not show at all if you sandblasted it. Now we'll probably reveal the original color if this blue isn't the original color too. Now I might be wrong. That might be a paint color there. I'm not sure. But it looks a lot like the nitrostan color. I don't even know if they make nitrostan anymore. We used to use it at my grandfather's. Horrible stuff that would cause a lot of swelling cracks when you used it, if you excessively used it. Alright, so that's been on a little bit more, but this stuff looked like it was doing it, but it's not biting as much. So let's let that one sit for a little longer. Redose that. And we'll take the paper towels here. This here, what I typically do is I get a little cardboard box, and I'll just scrape that into a cardboard box or a jar or something. Let me go get I'll get a jar and we'll put it into that. Alright, so we cleaned up that mess there, wiped it with paper towels. This one here has about the same amount of time now, and that's just not biting in. It looked really good when it first started, but it's not biting in. So the clean strip actually worked a lot better than, and I think that Jaguar was more expensive. So then what we do is, if there's enough paint removed here, we'll use the lacquer thinner and the steel wool, and that'll get the rest of it, but we're not there yet. We're going to need a second application here. My original thought might be right. This does look like nitrostan here, and this is a body filler bondo, and this is a red primer of sorts, and then there's a black, or I mean not a black, but a gray primer, and then the blue color. So this door's been damaged and dinged a bunch of times, so we're going to find out all this damage once we get this all stripped. So another application here, and we'll probably have to wipe this off, and we'll probably go with just with the clean strip. And I'm going to do some research for zip strip, because that's the one I used to favor when I was younger, and I've used that a lot. And it has been for sale recently, probably within the last 15 years or so, but now all we have is Home Depot for options, or a Lowe's, I guess, with no Lowe's local around here. So we'll get some more paint removal done on this, and then the next thing will be to strip the entire door. Alright, we got the door totally stripped now. Mark spent the time and stripped it, and what we learned is the paint stripper is not as good as it used to be. They removed the really good chemicals that used to really strip it faster. So it was a little slow, but Mark got it all done. Just takes a little more time. It's worth taking the time to do it. You can see the whole inside. The only part he didn't get was the inside of this panel, which is impossible to get. So what was a really good looking door exhibits a lot of problems. So we can see now the kick panel, the extent of the rust here. We've got a rusted problem here, and the question becomes whether we take that off and remake it, which is actually, that's a pretty easy a break bent piece. I've made a bunch of those, so that's pop riveted in plus welded, and it's not that bad to remove, and by removing that it makes it a lot easier to change out the skin part that we need. And let's just take a good look at all the different aspects here. This is supposed to be a flat plane, and the door, when it's in the car, if you put pressure on it here like this, you've got a tremendous amount of leverage, and it tends to bend those in. On the aluminum doors, they all break right there. That's the hinge panel, and that gets beat up pretty bad. On this 150, which is all steel, it has some cage nuts in there, and those are all rusted solid. And I don't know if Mark can get the camera in there or not, but if you can look in here, this is the reinforcer for the hinge panel, and it has these adjustable cage nuts, and those are in really bad shape, and that reinforces that panel by having the bead in it and these little flanges, and it all works good when it's in nice shape, but that's been abused pretty bad. So now this is an unusual situation here too. This is all supposed to be a flat plane except for where the lock is, and this is all distorted here, so that's going to need some attention. And this is all crimped on, so there's a sandwich rush issue here underneath, and we've got that rust on the kick panel. And then we also had this issue where there was bondo showing here, and I thought it was from an accident damage, but apparently it rotted out right here and they just filled it with bondo. So that needs to be addressed. And then you can see where there's all these holes here and all in here, that all that has to be addressed. Now it's possible we might be able to put a section of the door skin in like this and maybe save the rest of it. What has to happen is we have to totally de-rust this panel. And this was another interesting feature here, and this is again the great thing about using paint remover versus sandblasting is you can do this forensics. And you can see here where somebody took like a 24 grit grinder, and these were dents, and these might have been small parking lot dents at the early beginnings of the life of this door, maybe in 1961 or 2 or something like that, or maybe earlier. And they had a few dents there, and somebody wanted them repaired. And their idea of repair at that time was to pound them in a little bit, hit it with a grinder with a 24 grit on it, and then blob some bondo over it, and then smooth it all out. Well, when that happens, it causes swelling around the rest of the door, so the whole door is swelled up a little bit because of that. and there was the same problem over here because they probably did some hammering in a little bit over here. So underneath the bondo, it rusted. There's evidence of sandwich rust, sort of like underneath the bondo skim. And we just have innumerable little dings everywhere. Everywhere you look, there's a ding. So the question becomes, okay, are we going to fix all these little dings and these rust issues and the sandwich rust underneath that potentially could cause a problem later on? Or do we dismantle the whole door, and we dismantle the whole door and then we say, well, boy, that's pretty bad here. Do we piece this piece in? Do we piece this other side in over here? It becomes quite a task to totally restore this door. And there's two words we use: repair and restore. Repair means, okay, put it back so that it does its job of being a door. You can open the door, close the door, and it looks okay. But there's a lot of sin still there that hasn't been addressed. Restoring means you try to bring it back as good as it was new. And oftentimes the only way to do that is replace everything, because sandwich rust never sleeps. A sandblaster would not solve this problem at all. You're not going to get sandwich rust out with sandblasting. And the sandwich rust is going to be down in the lower half here. So we'll have to address that, but what needs to happen here to continue the analysis is to remove all of the rust that's showing here. And we're not going to use sandblasting, we're going to use a chelated rust remover. And we made a little dip tank. I had a couple sheets, 4x8 sheets of 18 gauge steel that I got somebody from nothing, I think. And that was perfect material to make a little dip tank. So we could make it so that we dip the whole door, but then you have to use a lot of the material. So we made this up, and we're going to do about 2/3 of the way up the door. And this is all passive. We'll just fill this up with the solution, and up to about 2/3 or so. And then that'll take 1 day, maybe 2 days before it does its magic. And then we'll flip it upside down the other way and take care of that. So the finish of all the de-rusting will probably be sometime next week. And then we'll see that in part 2. And then we will start addressing the restoration plan for making this door as good as new again. Alright, so we're ready to immerse this in the solution, but some people will say, well, what about stuff that you can't immerse? It's so big, like the front fender for a Jag, a 120 Jag is enormous, or a 150 Jag. And what you can do in a situation like that, or say you want to remove all the rust off a firewall off of the body or something, how I learned about this was one of my students from, I don't know, probably about almost 14 years ago or so, and he told me that he had done his Volvo 1800 using this method, where he bought about 4 or 5 of these little pumps. They're inexpensive at Harbor Freight and elsewhere, and these are immersion pumps. So you can, what he did on the Volvo, he put it on his whole Volvo body on a rotator, and underneath the rotator he put some heavy plastic that became the collector. And you put the pumps in the collector, and then you pump all around the different spots of the body. The Volvo 1800 is a unibody, so inside all the structural members, sort of the frame of the unibody, he was able to insert these tubes and keep circulating all the solution in there, totally de-rusting the inside of all the tubes and everything. Again, never would be touched with a sandblaster, and you don't have that residual problem of the sand coming out when you're doing the paint. So that's how you can solve the really big problems. I've done that quite a bit. It works really, really good. But in this case, it's very easy to make an immersion tank. So we're going to mix up, we've got some water here, We have 3 5-gallon buckets full of water, and we've got a 1 quart measuring cup here. It takes 1 quart to 5 gallons. So we have 5 gallons of solution here. We're going to mix this up and pour them in. And we'll get that all done. All right, so we filled up the tank, not full, but we're more than halfway up the side of the door here. So we'll get half done, flip it over, and get the other half done. It'll take a day, maybe day and a half on each side because of some really serious rust here. And next week we'll come back with part 2 of this series and show all of the revealed surfaces, and then we'll devise a plan as to how best to repair all the damage that we find. All right, so next week we'll have the reveal. We'll take this out of the tank. It'll be totally derusted, and you'll be amazed at how great this stuff works. Remember, you can get this on my Amazon store. It's Rust 911. The cost factor we have so far is about $20 for the paint remover, and I believe it was about 3 quarts of material that we put in. Yeah, 3 quarts of material, and you get 4 quarts for $60. So the cost is not that much when you consider what they would charge just to sandblast this door, which would include a lot of damage too. And it really wouldn't do the job that this does. So you can hold your judgment until you see what happens with this door next week. So that's it for Ray at Pro Shaper Workshop for today. And remember to like, subscribe, and keep the comments coming. Remember, metal is clay.